Hey y'all, tonight we're trading in our memory foam pillows for a bedroll in the dust-choked streets of Dodge City. Picture this, the sun's barely up, but the air already smells like horse sweat, gun oil, and last night's whiskey. You step off the stagecoach, boots crunching on gravel, and the first thing you notice is the noise. Shouting, hammers, a distant piano, and somewhere a gunshot that nobody seems to care about. You're not in Kansas anymore, Toto. Well, actually, you are, but this Kansas is a fever dream of greed, grit, and danger, and you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing who's drifting off from where. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge down Front Street, squinting against the dust devils swirling between wooden storefronts. The town's barely a decade old, but it already looks tired. Sagging porches, faded paint, and a hand-painted sign that reads, "Check your guns at the door." You wonder if anyone actually does. Spoiler, they don't. The first thing you learn is that boomtowns like Dodge City weren't built for comfort. They were built for speed. Speed of money, speed of violence, speed of dreams, rising and falling overnight. Historians still argue whether Dodge was ever truly the wickedest town in the West or just had the best publicist. But tonight, it's your home. You pass a row of saloons, each one promising cold beer and hot trouble. The Long Branch Saloon's got a piano player pounding out Camptown races and a crowd of cowboys already arguing over a spilled drink. You feel the tension. Everyone's watching everyone else, hands never far from their belts. There's a reason the average life expectancy here is measured in bar tabs, not birthdays. A sheriff leans in a doorway, badge tarnished, eyes scanning the crowd. He's outnumbered 100-1, and you can tell he knows it. You wonder if you should introduce yourself, but he gives you a look that says, "Don't make me remember your face." It's not personal, it's survival. You wander past the general store, where a sign advertises genuine gold pans and miracle elixirs. The storekeeper eyes you like fresh meat, and you realize that in this town, everyone's either a predator or prey, sometimes both, depending on the hour. Suddenly, a wagon rattles by, loaded with sacks of flour and a coffin. You try not to read too much into that. The Undertaker's shop is the only business that never seems to close. And rumor has it, he offers a buy one, get one free deal after midnight. Historians still debate whether that's just dark humor or a marketing strategy that actually worked. You duck into a side alley to escape the crowd, only to find yourself face to face with a pair of pigs rooting through garbage. They look at you like you're the intruder. In Boomtowns, even the livestock have attitude. You notice a flyer tacked to a post. Reward, $500 for the capture of Billy the Kid Jenkins, dead or alive. The dead or alive part isn't just for show. Out here, justice is as rough as the whiskey, and most folks prefer their outlaws with a few extra holes. A kid runs past you, barefoot and grinning, clutching a handful of coins. You wonder where he got them, but you're not sure you want to know. The only thing faster than a 6-shooter in Dodge is a rumor, and you're already hearing plenty. You stop to watch a blacksmith shoeing a horse, sweat pouring down his face. He nods at you, then goes back to his work. In Boomtowns, everyone's got a job to do, and nobody has time for small talk. Except the barber. He'll tell you every secret in town for the price of a shave. The sun climbs higher, and the heat settles in. You realize you're thirsty, but you hesitate before heading into a saloon. You've heard stories, some true, some probably not, about strangers who walked in for a drink and never walked out. Historians still debate how many of those tales were just cautionary warnings for newcomers like you. You finally step into the shade of a wooden porch, heart pounding, and take a breath. You made it through your first hour in Dodge City. Congratulations, only 23 more to go. And already, you're starting to understand why most folks who dreamed of frontier glory ended up running for the next train out, or didn't make it out at all. You lean against a post, watching the parade of hustlers, cowboys, and dreamers swirl past. Somewhere a dog barks, somewhere else a window shatters. You're not sure if you should laugh, run, or just accept your fate. After all, in Dodge City, survival isn't about being the fastest gun. It's about knowing when to duck, when to run, and when to disappear into the dust. You decide to brave the saloon anyway, because, let's face it, you're thirsty and a little too curious for your own good. The long branches swinging doors creak as you push inside, and the cool darkness swallows you up. Instantly, the smell hits: sweat, spilled beer, cigar smoke, and a hint of something that might be pickles, but you're not willing to investigate further. The piano player doesn't miss a beat, but a few heads swivel in your direction, sizing you up. You do your best to look harmless, which, in a place like this, is probably the most dangerous thing you could do. You sidle up to the bar, careful to keep your elbows tucked in. The bartender, a burly man with a handlebar mustache that could double as a broom, slides you a cloudy glass of something he claims is whiskey. You take a sip and immediately regret it. It tastes like regret, heartbreak, and a hint of turpentine. Historians still argue whether frontier whiskey was actually distilled or just strained through an old boot. But tonight, you're a believer in the latter. There's a card game in progress at a table in the corner, and the tension is thicker than the dust on the floorboards. A cowboy with a scar running down his cheek slams his fist on the table, sending poker chips flying. "You're cheating, Slim," he hollers, and suddenly everyone in the room is on edge. You freeze, glass halfway to your lips, and wonder if you should duck. The bartender just sighs, as if this is the third brawl today and it's barely noon. Saloon brawls weren't just the stuff of legend. They were practically a daily ritual. Mainstream history tells us that Dodge City's saloons averaged a fight every night, and sometimes more. The reasons were as varied as the patrons: a bad hand of cards, a spilled drink, or just the wrong look at the wrong time. Some say the real Wild West was less about shootouts and more about who could throw a better punch or break a chair over someone's back. You watch as the argument escalates. Slim, who's probably never been slim a day in his life, stands up, knocking his chair over. The scar-faced cowboy stands too, and you can feel the room holding its breath. The piano player, sensing the mood, switches to a jaunty tune, maybe "Oh, Susanna," as if to distract everyone from the impending chaos. Suddenly, Slim lunges and fists start flying. Chairs scrape, glasses shatter, and someone yells, "Not the piano!" You duck instinctively, remembering that in the Wild West, bystanders were just as likely to get a black eye as the participants. In fact, a quirky tidbit, some saloons actually kept a brawl fund in the till to pay for broken furniture. The owner would just sigh, replace the chair, and hope tomorrow's fight would be less expensive. You scramble out of the way as the fight spills across the room. Someone grabs a bottle and swings it, missing by a mile, but hitting a lamp instead. Oil splatters, and for a moment, you worry the whole place will go up in flames. But the bartender is ready. He smothers the flame with a wet towel, barely breaking a sweat. Clearly, this isn't his first rodeo. Historians still debate whether these brawls were spontaneous or sometimes staged to entertain newcomers and lighten their wallets while they were distracted. Either way, you're learning fast that the only thing more dangerous than a loaded gun in a saloon is an empty glass. The fight fizzles out as quickly as it started. Slim and Scarface are both bleeding, but they're laughing now, slapping each other on the back like old friends. Someone buys a round, and the mood shifts from deadly to rowdy in the blink of an eye. You realize that, in a way, these brawls are a kind of frontier therapy, letting off steam before things get truly ugly. You take another sip of your whiskey, wincing, and glance at the bar mirror. Your reflection looks a little paler than usual, and you make a mental note to avoid card games and eye contact for the rest of the night. The bartender gives you a knowing nod, as if to say, "You'll get used to it, or you won't." As the afternoon wears on, the saloon fills with more cowboys, prospectors, and a few women in bright dresses who seem to know exactly how to handle themselves. You watch as a new card game starts, and the cycle begins again. Jokes, laughter, tension, and the ever-present threat of flying fists. Outside, you hear the distant clang of the blacksmith's hammer and the shouts of a cattle drive passing through. But inside, the world shrinks to the size of a whiskey glass and the flickering lamplight. You realize that, in the Wild West, the saloon isn't just a place to drink. It's the beating, brawling heart of the town. And if you want to last more than a day, you'd better learn how to duck, dodge, and maybe throw a punch or two yourself. Just remember, in Dodge City, the only thing more dangerous than a sore loser is a sober one. You're still rubbing your jaw in sympathy for Slim and Scarface when you notice a new commotion by the door. A wiry man in a dusty bowler hat is holding court, waving a small leather pouch and promising riches to anyone with a keen eye and a steady hand. The crowd parts, curiosity piqued, and you get your first real taste of the Gold Rush con game, Frontier Edition. You edge closer, drawn in by the man's patter. He claims to have struck gold just outside town, and for a modest fee, he'll share the location. The pitch is slick, the pouch heavy in his palm. He opens it with a flourish, revealing a few glinting nuggets. The crowd oohs and ahs, but you notice something odd. The gold looks a little too shiny, a little too perfect. You remember hearing that some swindlers mixed brass filings with real gold to bulk up their finds, and you wonder if you're witnessing the classic salted mine trick in action. Mainstream history tells us that the Wild West was a magnet for dreamers and drifters, but it was also a playground for professional liars. Some estimates say that in certain boomtowns, as many as half the mining claims were outright frauds. Historians still argue whether the infamous Lost Dutchman's mine ever existed, or if it was just a story cooked up to keep the gullible chasing mirages in the desert. You watch as a burly rancher hands over a fistful of coins, eager for his share of the strike. The con man scribbles a map on a scrap of paper, hands it over, and pockets the cash with a wink. The rancher leaves, grinning, but you have a sinking feeling he'll be back tomorrow, dusty, broke, and a little wiser. The con man isn't done. He moves on to miracle elixirs, promising cures for everything from snakebite to heartbreak. You're tempted to ask if he's got something for a bruised ego, but you hold your tongue. The bottle he holds up is filled with a murky liquid that smells suspiciously like last night's dishwater. Still, the crowd eats it up. A woman in a faded bonnet buys 2 bottles, just in case. You sidle up to the bar again, watching the show. The bartender leans in and mutters, "Don't believe a word of it. Last week, he was selling genuine dinosaur bones. Turned out to be cow ribs painted white." You chuckle, but you're also a little impressed. It takes guts to run a scam in a town where everyone's armed. A quirky tidbit: some gold rush towns had fake assayers who'd set up shop for a week, buy up worthless rocks from hopeful miners, and vanish before anyone caught on. One legend claims a man in California made a fortune selling golden gravel by the sack until someone realized it was just river sand mixed with pyrite. Historians still debate whether these scams were tolerated as a kind of entertainment, or if townsfolk just got too tired to chase every swindler out of town. Either way, you realize that in the Wild West, trust is a luxury you can't afford. If you're not careful, you'll be broke before sunset. The con man wraps up his pitch and slips out the back, whistling. The crowd disperses, some grumbling, some laughing. You spot the rancher at the bar, already drowning his sorrows. You think about offering sympathy, but decide against it. In Dodge City, everyone learns the hard way. You step outside for some air, the sun now high and merciless. The street is alive with hustlers hawking everything from genuine Indian arrowheads, freshly carved this morning, to patented snake oil, guaranteed to cure boredom, if nothing else. You realize that the real gold rush isn't in the ground. It's in the pockets of the hopeful and the gullible. A kid runs by, waving a flyer for a sure thing poker game tonight. You tuck it in your pocket, making a mental note to avoid it. If the house always wins in Vegas, imagine your odds in a place where the dealer might be packing a Derringer. You lean against a hitching post, watching the endless parade of schemes and dreams. Somewhere, a preacher is promising salvation for a nickel, while a gambler offers to double your money. No questions asked. You start to see the pattern. In the Wild West, everyone's selling something, and the only thing more dangerous than a loaded gun is an empty wallet. You wonder how long you'd last before someone took you for everything you had? The answer, you suspect, is not long. Maybe that's why so many folks moved on, chasing the next big score, always hoping the next town would be different. Spoiler, it never was. You're parched now, lips cracked and tongue thick, so you wander behind the saloon in search of water. The sun beats down with a vengeance, and the only shade is a scraggly mesquite tree that looks one dust storm away from giving up. You spot a battered barrel labeled drinking water and peer inside. The water is cloudy and smells faintly of iron and old boots. You hesitate, remembering every childhood warning about don't drink the water. But out here, you don't have much choice. You dip a tin cup and take a tentative sip. It's warm, metallic, and tastes like it's been filtered through a rusty harmonica. Mainstream history tells us that frontier towns often struggled with clean water. Wells ran dry, rivers were fouled by livestock, and rain barrels collected more bugs than rain. Historians still argue whether more people died from bad water or bad whiskey, but you're starting to think it's a tie. A wiry prospector shuffles over, grinning through a mouthful of missing teeth. If you're real thirsty, he drawls, there's always cactus water. He gestures toward the prickly pears dotting the edge of town, their green pads promising relief. You've seen enough movies to know this is supposed to be a survival hack, so you ask how it works. He pulls out a battered knife and slices a pad open, revealing a gooey, slimy mess. Just suck out the juice, he says, offering you a piece. You hesitate, but curiosity wins out. The taste is bitter, almost soapy, and it leaves your mouth numb. The prospector laughs. That's the trick. Some cactus will keep you alive. Some will make you wish you were dead. Turns out, many desert cacti are loaded with oxalic acid, which can cause everything from stomach cramps to kidney failure. A quirky tidbit, in the 1800s, more than one desperate traveler met their end by trusting the wrong succulent. You spit out the pulp, feeling queasy. The prospector shrugs. Better luck next time. He wanders off, whistling, probably to sell another miracle remedy to the next greenhorn. You realize that surviving the desert isn't just about toughness. It's about knowing which plants won't kill you. And let's be honest, you're batting 0 so far. You stagger back toward town, stomach churning. A group of cowboys lounges under the awning of the general store, passing around a jug. You ask if it's water, and they laugh. It's cowboy coffee, one says, pouring you a cup. It's black as midnight and twice as bitter, but at least it doesn't taste like poison. You sip gratefully, ignoring the grit at the bottom. Historians still debate whether the cactus water myth was a genuine survival tip or just a cruel joke played on newcomers. Either way, you're learning that the Wild West is full of advice that sounds good until you try it. Like the story of the desert spoon plant, supposedly a source of emergency water, but actually a recipe for a night spent doubled over in pain. You wander past the livery stable, where a sign advertises fresh water, 5 cents a bucket. You fork over a coin, and the stable hand hands you a dented pail. The water is cool, clear, and tastes like heaven. You realize that in Boomtowns, water is more precious than gold, and just as easy to fake. Some enterprising souls even sold imported spring water that was really just rainwater scooped from a muddy puddle. A dog lopes by, tongue hanging out, and you share a splash from your bucket. The dog gives you a grateful look, then trots off in search of shade. You watch him go, thinking that maybe animals have the right idea. Stick to the basics, trust your instincts, and never drink anything you can't pronounce. As the afternoon heat shimmers off the rooftops, you find yourself longing for the comforts of home. Ice cubes, filtered water, maybe even a lemon wedge. But out here, survival is a daily gamble, and every sip is a reminder that the Wild West wasn't just dangerous because of outlaws and brawls. Sometimes the land itself was your deadliest enemy. You head back toward the saloon, stomach still uneasy, and vow to stick to coffee and whiskey from now on. At least you know what you're getting, more or less. And if you make it through the night without sprouting cactus needles, you'll call it a win. You're still eyeing the cactus pads with suspicion when a sudden commotion erupts down the street. A herd of trail-weary cowboys, dust-caked and sunburned, thunder into town on horseback, whooping and hollering like they've just discovered a new planet. Their arrival is less a homecoming and more an invasion. Think less welcome wagon, more brace yourself. You step aside just in time to avoid being trampled by a horse with more attitude than sense. The cowboys dismount in front of the nearest saloon, spurs jangling, hats askew. You watch as they swagger inside, already itching for trouble. Mainstream history tells us that cattle drives were brutal, weeks-long odysseys across open plains. And when they finally ended in a boomtown, the pent-up energy had to go somewhere. Historians still argue whether the legendary Cowboy Brawl was spontaneous or a calculated way to blow off steam. But tonight, you're about to see the answer firsthand. Inside, the saloon's mood shifts the moment the cowboys enter. The piano player speeds up, sensing the change in atmosphere. The bartender braces himself, eyeing the rowdiest of the bunch, a red-haired giant known as Big Tom, whose fists are as famous as his temper. You find a seat in the corner, hoping to stay out of the blast radius. Big Tom slams a silver dollar on the bar and demands whiskey for his crew. The bartender pours with trembling hands, and the cowboys toast to making it out alive. You notice the regulars edging away, giving the newcomers plenty of space. It's an unspoken rule. When a cattle drive hits town, everyone else learns to duck. The first sign of trouble is subtle. A spilled drink, a careless elbow, a glare held a second too long. Then, like clockwork, the tension snaps. Big Tom laughs too loud at a joke. Someone takes offense, and suddenly the air is thick with shouts and threats. You watch as the cowboys square off, their movements almost choreographed. It's less a fight, more a ritual, a way to prove themselves after weeks of hardship. A quirky tidbit: some boomtowns hired bouncer squads made up of retired prize-fighters to keep the peace during cattle drives. Their job wasn't to stop the fights, just to make sure nobody died. You spot one such bouncer now, a burly man with cauliflower ears and a nose that's been broken more times than you can count. He stands back, arms crossed, ready to intervene if things get out of hand. The first punch lands, and chaos erupts. Chairs fly, tables overturn, and someone swings from the chandelier, because apparently that's a thing people actually did. You duck as a whiskey glass sails past your head, shattering against the wall. The bouncer wades in, grabbing two cowboys by the scruff of their necks and tossing them outside like sacks of potatoes. Historians still debate whether these barroom brawls were a necessary evil or just a symptom of a lawless society. Some say they helped cowboys blow off steam and prevent worse violence later. Others argue they were just another way for boomtowns to prove their toughness. Either way, you're learning that in the Wild West, survival isn't just about avoiding bullets. It's about knowing when to duck and when to run. The fight spills out into the street, drawing a crowd. You follow at a safe distance, heart pounding. Big Tom and his opponent circle each other, fists raised, while the townsfolk place bets. The sheriff appears, arms folded, watching with a resigned expression. He knows better than to intervene, at least until someone pulls a weapon. Eventually, the brawl fizzles out. The cowboys, bruised and battered, shake hands and stagger back inside for another round. The crowd disperses, and the sheriff tips his hat, crisis averted. You breathe a sigh of relief, grateful to have survived your first cowboy brawl, if only as a spectator. You slip back into the saloon, nerves jangling. The bartender slides you a drink on the house, a silent reward for keeping your head down. You realize that in boomtowns, every night is a gamble, and sometimes the best you can hope for is to make it out in one piece. You take a sip, savoring the burn, and wonder what other rituals this wild place has in store for you. You're nursing your drink, still shaken from the flying chairs and fists, when a hush sweeps through the saloon. Even the piano player lets his hands hover above the keys, waiting. The doors creak open, and a figure steps inside. A wiry man with a battered hat pulled low and a revolver hanging heavy at his side. You recognize him from the wanted posters. Billy the Kid Jenkins, the outlaw everyone in town pretends not to see. He moves straight to the bar, orders whiskey, and surveys the room with a lazy confidence that makes your skin crawl. The atmosphere is thick with unspoken threats. You realize you're witnessing the prelude to something big, something the locals will whisper about for years. Historians still argue whether the infamous Jenkins Saloon massacre was a planned ambush or a powder keg waiting for a spark. But tonight, you're about to see just how quickly frontier justice can turn lethal. Billy downs his drink and locks eyes with the town sheriff, who's been lurking in the corner. The sheriff, a grizzled man with a badge that's seen better days, stands up and clears his throat. "Billy," he says, voice steady but strained, "you know you're not welcome here." The room tenses. You shrink into your chair, wishing you could melt into the floorboards. Billy grins and tips his hat. "Just here for a drink, Sheriff. No trouble." But everyone knows that's a lie. The sheriff's hand hovers near his gun, and you can almost hear the collective heartbeat of the room. A quirky tidbit. In some boomtowns, saloon owners kept a peacekeeper's chair, a reinforced seat bolted to the floor, reserved for the most notorious troublemakers. Tonight, you wish you had one. Suddenly, a shot rings out. No one's sure who fired first. Glass shatters, people dive for cover, and the room erupts in chaos. You hit the floor, heart hammering, as bullets whiz overhead. The sheriff and Billy trade shots, their faces twisted in grim determination. The bartender ducks behind the bar, clutching a shotgun, while the piano player crawls under his instrument, muttering prayers. The fight is over in seconds, but it feels like an eternity. When the smoke clears, Billy lies bleeding on the floor, the sheriff slumped beside him. The silence is deafening. You peek over the edge of your table, half expecting another round, but it's done. The townsfolk emerge from their hiding places, faces pale and eyes wide. Mainstream history records the Jenkins Saloon massacre as one of the bloodiest shootouts in Dodge City's history. Some say it was the beginning of the end for the town's lawless days. Historians still debate whether Billy was set up or simply outgunned. But one thing's clear. In the Wild West, justice is swift, brutal, and rarely fair. The Undertaker arrives, measuring the bodies with a practiced eye. You watch as he hauls them away, already calculating his fee. The bartender sweeps up broken glass, and the piano player resumes his tune, hands shaking but determined. Life goes on, even after death. You stagger outside, gulping fresh air, and realize you're shaking. The street is eerily quiet, as if the whole town is holding its breath. A dog sniffs at a bloodstain, then trots off, unimpressed. You lean against a post, trying to steady your nerves. You've survived your first gunfight, barely. A group of townsfolk gathers, whispering about what happened. Some blame the sheriff, others blame Billy, but most just shake their heads and move on. You overhear a grizzled old-timer say, "That's the West for you." 1 minute you're drinking, the next you're dodging bullets. You can't argue with that. You wander back inside, the saloon already returning to its usual rhythm. The bartender pours another round, and the regulars raise their glasses in a silent toast to the fallen. You join in, feeling the weight of the moment. In Boomtowns, life is cheap, and death is a constant companion. You start to understand why so many people left for quieter places, or didn't leave at all. As the night wears on, the story of the Jenkins Saloon massacre grows with each retelling. Some say Billy drew first, others swear it was the sheriff. Historians will argue about it for decades, but you know the truth. In the Wild West, the line between hero and villain is as thin as a trigger finger. You finish your drink, grateful to be alive, and wonder what fresh dangers tomorrow will bring. Out here, survival isn't just about luck. It's about timing, instincts, and knowing when to duck. And if you're smart, you'll keep your head down and your back to the wall. You wake up the next morning to the sound of boots thudding on the wooden walkway outside your window. The air is crisp, carrying the scent of sagebrush and last night's gunpowder. You survived another Dodge City night, but your luck is about to be tested in a whole new way because you're heading north, chasing gold fever straight into the Klondike. You hitch a ride with a caravan of prospectors, their wagons loaded with dreams and dubious supplies. The journey is long, cold, and relentless. Every bump in the road rattles your bones, and you quickly realize that the gold rush isn't all shimmering nuggets and easy fortunes. Mainstream history tells us that the Klondike gold rush of the late 1890s drew tens of thousands of hopefuls up to Alaska and the Yukon. Most found only hardship, hunger, and heartbreak. Historians still argue whether the journey itself was more dangerous than the goldfields, but you're about to find out firsthand. You arrive in Skagway, gateway to the north, and the first thing you notice is the chaos. Tents and shacks sprawl across the muddy streets, and every face you see is hungry, hungry for gold, hungry for luck, hungry for a way out. It's here you meet Jefferson Soapy Smith, the king of Klondike con men. He's got a smile that could sell sand in the desert, and a gang of cronies ready to fleece anyone with a spare dollar. You watch as Soapy sets up his infamous prize soap scam. He wraps bars of soap in paper, some with cash hidden inside, and auctions them off to the crowd. The catch? Only his own men ever seem to win the big prizes. The crowd grumbles, but the show goes on. You're tempted to try your luck, but remember how easily you were swindled back in Dodge. A quirky tidbit: Soapy once convinced an entire crowd that he was the legitimate mayor of Skagway, at least until the real authorities showed up. You wander through the muddy streets, dodging pickpockets and hustlers. Every corner promises a shortcut to riches. Guaranteed gold claims, surefire poker wins, miracle elixir cures gold fever. You watch a miner hand over his last coin for a map to a secret strike, only to discover it leads straight into a swamp. You realize that in the Klondike, the only thing colder than the wind is the welcome for outsiders. You try your hand at panning for gold in a freezing creek. Your fingers go numb, and after an hour, all you have to show for it is a handful of gravel and a new appreciation for central heating. You ask a grizzled prospector for advice, and he laughs. If you want to get rich in the Klondike, he says, open a bar or a bakery. The miners'll pay anything for a warm meal and a cold drink. Historians still debate whether more fortunes were made selling supplies than actually mining gold. Judging by the long line at the bakery, you suspect the answer is yes. Night falls, and you find yourself in a ramshackle saloon, the air thick with smoke and desperation. Soapy Smith is holding court at the bar, spinning tales of riches just over the next hill. You watch as a newcomer bets his last dollar on a rigged game of faro, losing it all in seconds. The crowd laughs, but you feel a pang of sympathy. Out here, everyone's a mark, even you. You step outside, shivering in the northern wind. The aurora dances overhead, painting the sky in ghostly greens and purples. For a moment, you forget the scams and the cold and just marvel at the wild beauty of the frontier. But the spell breaks quickly. A shout, a scuffle, and you remember where you are. In the Klondike, hope is as fleeting as gold dust on the wind. You head back to your tent, pockets empty, but spirit intact. You've survived another day, but you know tomorrow will bring new challenges and new scams, because in the Wild West, And especially in the Klondike, survival isn't just about grit or luck. It's about knowing when to hold 'em, when to fold 'em, and when to run for the hills. You're still brushing frost from your sleeves when you hear a commotion near the edge of camp. A crowd has gathered around a mound of dirt, excitement buzzing in the air. Someone's struck it rich, or so they claim. You edge closer, curiosity piqued, and see a grinning prospector waving a handful of glittering rocks. Gold, real gold, he shouts, and the crowd surges forward, hungry for a piece of the action. But as you watch, doubt creeps in. The gold looks suspiciously brassy, and the prospector's smile is a little too wide. Mainstream history tells us that for every genuine strike, there were a dozen salted claims, mines seeded with fool's gold or even gold dust sprinkled on the surface and to lure in investors. Historians still argue whether the legendary Great Diamond Hoax of 1872 was the work of criminal masterminds or just lucky opportunists. But tonight, you're seeing the con in action. The prospector offers to sell shares in his claim, promising untold riches. Eager hands thrust coins and crumpled bills his way. You hang back, remembering the countless scams you've already witnessed. A quirky tidbit: some claim jumpers in the Old West would borrow a friend's gold dust to sprinkle on their own land, then vanish with investors' money before anyone caught on. You strike up a conversation with a grizzled old miner watching from the sidelines. He spits tobacco and shakes his head. "Seen it 100 times," he mutters. By the time they figure out it's fool's gold, he'll be halfway to Seattle. You nod, grateful for the warning, and resolve to keep your money in your pocket. But the scams don't end with fake gold. You wander through camp and spot a man selling patented gold detectors, strange contraptions of wire and wood that supposedly guarantee instant riches. You watch as a hopeful prospector waves the device over a pile of rocks, only for it to beep wildly at a rusty horseshoe. The seller shrugs, pockets the cash, and moves on to his next victim. You realize that the dream of instant wealth is the real product being sold here. The gold, the gadgets, the maps, they're just props in a never-ending show. You marvel at the creativity of the con artist, even as you pity the hopeful souls who fall for their tricks. Historians still debate whether these scams were inevitable in a world fueled by desperation and greed, or if they were a symptom of something darker, a society willing to believe anything if it meant a shot at fortune. You think back to the present day, where modern versions of these cons still flourish. Gold bar scams, fake mining stocks, and get-rich-quick schemes echo the same promises and the same heartbreaks of the Old West. A quirky tidbit: in 2012, a group of scammers in California sold painted lead bars as Spanish treasure, raking in millions before being caught. Turns out the tools change, but the dreams and the gullibility stay the same. As night falls, you sit by the campfire, listening to stories of fortunes won and lost. The flames flicker, casting long shadows on faces etched with hope and regret. You realize that in the Wild West, the real gamble isn't at the card table or in the mine. It's entrusting the wrong person at the wrong time. You wrap your blanket tighter, grateful to have survived another day without losing your shirt. You know that tomorrow will bring more dirt pile fortunes, more fool's gold, and more chances to be swindled blind. But for now, you let the warmth of the fire lull you to sleep, dreaming of a world where honesty is worth more than gold. You wake to the sound of boots, crunching frost, and the distant clang of a bell. Someone's lost a horse, or maybe a fortune. As you stretch, a thought nags at you. What if you really did need help? In the Wild West, lawmen are supposed to be the last line of defense. But as you soon discover, the sheriff's badge is more decoration than guarantee. You wander into the heart of town, where the sheriff's office sits wedged between the Undertaker and the gambling hall. A placement that feels a little too on the nose. The sheriff himself is slouched in a rickety chair, boots up, hat pulled low. He's got a shotgun across his lap and a look that says he's seen it all and would rather not see any more. You approach, hoping for reassurance, but he just grunts and gestures at a stack of wanted posters. Pick one, he says. They're all trouble. Mainstream history paints sheriffs as brave, lone defenders of justice, but the reality is messier. Most were outnumbered, outgunned, and paid less than a bartender. Some were honest, risking their lives for towns that barely thanked them. Others, well, let's just say their loyalty went to the highest bidder. Historians still argue whether legendary lawmen like Wyatt Earp were heroes or hustlers with a badge. You ask the sheriff what he'd do if a gang rode into town. He shrugs. Depends who's paying. You're not sure if he's joking. A quirky tidbit. In some boomtowns, sheriffs were elected by popular vote, meaning the most charming outlaw could end up running the jail. In others, the job was so dangerous that new sheriffs had to be recruited from passing stagecoaches, sometimes at gunpoint. You watch as a frazzled storekeeper bursts in waving a pistol and shouting about a robbery. The sheriff sighs, stands, and ambles outside. You follow, curious. The storekeeper points to a shadowy figure disappearing down the alley. The sheriff squints, shrugs, and says, "He'll be back. They always are." You get the feeling that justice here is less about catching criminals and more about keeping the peace, however loosely defined. As the day unfolds, you see the sheriff break up a poker fight, chase off a drunk, and negotiate a truce between two rival cattlemen. He spends more time talking than shooting, and you realize his real weapon is patience. But when a stranger tries to cheat at cards, the sheriff's hand moves lightning fast to his gun. The message is clear. There are rules, even if they're unwritten. You hear whispers about the sheriff's past. Some say he used to ride with outlaws. Others claim he once shot a man for snoring too loud. Historians still debate the truth, but in the Wild West, reputation is everything. You notice folks treat the sheriff with a mix of fear and respect, never quite sure which side of the law he's on today. By sundown, you've seen enough to know that relying on the law is a gamble. If you're lucky, the sheriff's on your side. If not, well, there's always the next town. You realize that in a place where justice is a moving target, survival means trusting your instincts and keeping your back to the wall. As you head back to your bunk, you pass the sheriff sitting on the porch, cleaning his gun. He gives you a nod, and you wonder if it's a warning or a blessing. Either way, you're grateful to have made it through another day without needing his help. In the Wild West, that's about as close to safety as you'll ever get. You're starting to think you've seen it all, but then you find yourself walking down Allen Street in Tombstone as the sun rises, painting the sky with streaks of blood orange and gold. The town is quiet, but there's a tension in the air, like everyone's holding their breath, waiting for the next disaster. You pull your coat tighter, boots echoing on the wooden planks, and wonder how anyone ever called this place home. Tombstone's reputation isn't just legend. It's a living, breathing thing. Mainstream history tells us this was the site of the infamous gunfight at the OK Corral, but that was only one of countless deadly encounters. Historians still argue whether Tombstone was the most dangerous town in the West or just the most famous, but you can feel the ghosts of old gunfighters watching your every move. You pass the Crystal Palace Saloon, its windows still smudged from last night's brawl. Inside, a bartender sweeps up broken glass, whistling a tune you don't recognize. You peek through the swinging doors and see a group of gamblers hunched over a table, eyes darting, hands twitching near their holsters. You decide to keep moving. No sense tempting fate before breakfast. A quirky tidbit: Tombstone's Boot Hill Cemetery is packed with men who died with their boots on, a euphemism for meeting a violent end. The headstones are a mix of dark humor and grim reality. One reads, "Here lies Lester Moore, 4 slugs from a 44, no less, no more." You wonder if the townsfolk ever got used to the constant funerals, or if they just learned to laugh in the face of death. As you stroll past the Grand Hotel, you overhear a heated argument spilling into the street. 2 men, red-faced and wild-eyed, are accusing each other of cheating at cards. Within seconds, guns are drawn. You duck behind a water trough, heart pounding, as shots ring out. The fight is over in a flash. One man lies bleeding. The other runs off, vanishing into the maze of alleyways. The bystanders barely react. Someone mutters, "That's Tuesday," and goes back to sweeping the porch. You realize that in Tombstone, violence isn't an event. It's a daily routine. Mainstream history paints the Wild West as a place of constant danger. But here, it's woven into the fabric of life. Historians still debate whether the town's lawmen, like the Earp brothers, brought order or just added fuel to the fire. Either way, you know you wouldn't last a week. You wander into the Tombstone Epitaph office, where the editor is already typing up the morning's gunfight. He offers you a cup of bitter coffee and a warning: if you want to survive in this town, keep your mouth shut and your eyes open. You nod, grateful for the advice, and slip back outside. The sun climbs higher, and the streets fill with miners, gamblers, and ladies in bright dresses. Every face tells a story, some hopeful, some haunted. You spot a group of children playing shootout, their fingers mimicking pistols, their laughter echoing off the adobe walls. You wonder what kind of childhood this is, growing up where every day could be your last. A funeral procession passes by, slow and solemn. The Undertaker tips his hat, and you notice he's the busiest man in town. You remember the old saying, in Tombstone, you can check in anytime you like, but you might not check out. It's meant as a joke, but you're not laughing. As dusk falls, you find yourself back on Allen Street, the day's dangers fading into memory. The lamps flicker to life, casting long shadows across the boardwalk. You take a deep breath, grateful to have survived another day in Tombstone. But you know that tomorrow will bring new risks, new rivalries, and new reasons to keep your head down. You head for the safety of your room, heart still racing. In Tombstone, every sunrise is a gamble, and every sunset is a victory. You pull the curtains tight, listening to the distant sound of laughter and gunfire, and wonder what fresh dangers the night will bring. You wake to the sound of hammers and shouting, never a good sign in a boomtown. Peeking through your window, you see a crowd gathered around a half-finished building, arguing about who owns what. The silver mines are still running, but the tension is thick. You pull on your boots and step outside, drawn by the sense that something big is about to break. Boomtowns, like Tombstone, lived and died by the whims of the earth. Mainstream history tells us that fortunes were made overnight, but just as quickly, entire towns could vanish when the mines ran dry. You walk past empty storefronts, their windows boarded up, and see for sale signs everywhere. Historians still argue whether these towns were built on hope or pure speculation, but you can see the truth in every abandoned building. You wander down the main street, dodging a wagon piled high with furniture. A family is leaving town, their faces grim. You overhear the father mutter, "No silver, no supper." It's a harsh reality. When the ore veins dried up, so did the jobs, the money, and the dreams. A quirky tidbit: some towns tried to reinvent themselves as health resorts or railroad hubs after the bust, offering miracle cures or promising new industries. Most failed, but a few, like Denver, managed to survive by sheer stubbornness. You stop at the general store, where the shelves are half empty and the shopkeeper looks worried. "Can't get supplies," he says, shaking his head. No one wants to haul goods to a dying town. Prices are sky high, and you realize that even if you struck it rich, you might not be able to buy what you need. The boom and bust cycle isn't just about money. It's about hope, trust, and the constant fear that tomorrow will be worse than today. You hear rumors of a new strike in a neighboring valley. The excitement is palpable. Already, some folks are packing up, ready to chase the next big thing. You wonder how many times a person can start over before they run out of luck. Historians still debate whether the endless search for the next bonanza was a sign of optimism or desperation. Maybe it's both. As the day wears on, you watch the town unravel. The saloon is half empty, the piano silent. The Undertaker sits on his porch, whittling a piece of wood, waiting for business that may never come. You pass the schoolhouse, its windows dark, and wonder what happened to all the children who once played in the dusty streets. A group of miners gathers outside the assay office, arguing over unpaid wages. The owner, a slick man in a fancy vest, promises payment next week, but you can see the doubt in their eyes. You realize that in the Wild West, trust is as scarce as silver. A quirky tidbit: some towns printed their own money, scrip, when cash ran out, hoping to keep the economy alive just a little longer. Most of it ended up as wallpaper or fire starter. As night falls, you sit on the steps of the empty hotel, watching the last wagon roll out of town. The silence is heavy, broken only by the distant howl of a coyote. You think about all the dreams that built this place and all the heartbreak left behind. In the Wild West, the line between boom and bust is razor thin, and the only sure thing is change. You pull your coat tighter, grateful for a roof over your head, at least for tonight. Tomorrow, who knows? Maybe you'll chase the next rumor, or maybe you'll stay and watch the town fade into history. Either way, you understand now. In the Wild West, survival isn't just about grit or luck. It's about knowing when to hold on and when to let go. You wake to a chill in the air and the sound of boots on creaking floorboards above you. You're not in Tombstone anymore. You've drifted north to Deadwood, where the promise of gold lingers in every shadow and the past never quite lets go. The town is a tangle of muddy streets, rickety buildings, and legends whispered over whiskey glasses. You pull your coat tighter and step into the morning fog, drawn as if by fate to the most famous saloon in town. Number 10. Mainstream history tells us that Deadwood was a magnet for outlaws, gamblers, and fortune seekers. But it's the story of Wild Bill Hickok that keeps the town's heart beating. Historians still argue whether Wild Bill was the fastest gun in the West or just the unluckiest. But tonight, you're about to witness the hand that changed everything. You push through the swinging doors of Saloon number 10, the wood worn smooth by thousands of hopeful hands. The place is already half full, the air thick with cigar smoke and anticipation. At a table in the back sits Wild Bill himself, hair long, mustache bristling, eyes sharp as a hawk's. He's playing poker, as always, but tonight there's a nervous energy about him. You find a spot at the bar, trying to blend in and order a drink. A quirky tidbit: Wild Bill had a habit of always sitting with his back to the wall, a trick he picked up from years of dodging bullets and angry husbands. But tonight, the only open seat faces the door. He hesitates, then sits, cards clutched tight. You watch as he plays hand after hand, winning some, losing others. The tension in the room grows with every bet. Suddenly, the doors swing open, and a man named Jack McCall stumbles in, eyes wild, hand shaking. He circles the table, muttering. The regulars tense up, sensing trouble. You feel the hairs on your neck rise, the room holding its breath. McCall steps behind Wild Bill and without warning draws a pistol and fires. The shot cracks like thunder. Bill slumps forward, cards scattering across the table, aces and eights, the infamous dead man's hand. The room explodes in chaos. Some dive for cover, others rush to help. You're frozen, staring at the legend who just became history. Mainstream history records this moment as the end of the Old West's greatest gambler. But the debates rage on. Historians still argue whether McCall acted out of vengeance, madness, or was paid off by Bill's enemies. The truth, like so much in Deadwood, is buried beneath layers of rumor and regret. The bartender pours around for the house, and the regulars raise their glasses in a silent toast. You join in, feeling the weight of the moment. The Undertaker arrives, his face a mask of practiced sorrow, and carries Wild Bill away. The saloon falls silent, the only sound the shuffle of cards being gathered for the next game. You step outside, the night air sharp with the scent of pine and gunpowder. The streets are quieter now, but you can still feel the pulse of the town, restless, hungry, never satisfied. You realize that in Deadwood, legends are born and buried in the blink of an eye. Survival here isn't about luck or skill. It's about timing, instinct, and never letting your guard down. As you walk back to your room, you pass a group of gamblers arguing over the details of Bill's last hand. Some say he knew it was coming. Others insist it was pure chance. You realize that in the Wild West, every story grows in the telling, and every legend leaves behind a shadow. You close your eyes, the image of aces and eights burned into your mind. In Deadwood, even the greatest can fall with a single misstep. You pull the covers tight, grateful to have survived another day in a town where fortune changes with the turn of a card. You wake with a dry mouth and a pounding headache, the kind only frontier living, or maybe last night's whiskey, can deliver. The sun is already high, baking the muddy streets and sending shimmering waves of heat through the air. You stumble outside, desperate for water, and find yourself reflecting on all the survival tips you've picked up since arriving out west. Hollywood makes it look easy. Just find a cactus, wring out some water, and patch yourself up with a bandana. But out here, you quickly learn that most of what you've seen on screen is more likely to get you killed than save your hide. You pass a group of miners huddled around a campfire, boiling water in a battered coffee pot. One of them offers you a cup, and you accept gratefully until you taste it. It's bitter, gritty, and tastes faintly of old socks, but it's safe. Mainstream history tells us that boiling water was the best way to avoid the dysentery and cholera that plagued Boomtowns. Historians still argue whether more people died from bad water or bad bullets, but you're starting to think the answer is yes. You wander past the town doctor's office, a ramshackle building with a faded sign. Dr. T.H. Quimby, physician, dentist, veterinary. Inside, the doctor is treating a patient with a bottle of laudanum and a saw that's seen better days. You wince as you remember all those movie scenes where the hero digs out a bullet with a bowie knife, wraps the wound in a clean cloth, and rides off into the sunset. Out here, even a scratch can turn deadly. A quirky tidbit, frontier medicine included everything from whiskey compresses to spiderweb bandages, and doctors sometimes relied on advice from traveling salesmen selling miracle cures. You ask the doctor about snake bites, expecting a confident answer. He shrugs. Best thing to do? Don't get bit. He offers you a bottle of snake oil, guaranteed to cure what ails you. You politely decline, remembering the stories of desperate folks who drank kerosene or turpentine because someone swore it would help. Historians still debate whether snake oil salesmen believed in their own products or just enjoyed the profits. You wander into the desert, the sun beating down. You spot a barrel cactus and remember all those survival shows. You hack it open, only to find the inside is more like bitter slime than refreshing water. Your tongue tingles unpleasantly, and you spit it out, realizing you've just dodged a nasty stomachache, or worse. A nearby cowboy laughs and hands you a canteen. City folks always try that once, he says. Second time, they know better. You stumble back to town, grateful for the shade of the livery stable. You watch as a horse wrangler tends to a cut with axle grease and a strip of old shirt. You ask if that's safe, and he grins. Safer than the docs saw. You realize that most frontier medicine is a mix of hope, habit, and whatever's on hand. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You sit on the porch, sipping your gritty coffee, and watch as a group of prospectors argue over the best way to treat sunstroke. One swears by soaking a rag in vinegar and tying it around your neck. Another claims you should bury yourself in cool sand. You decide to stick to the shade and drink slowly, grateful for small mercies. As the sun sets, you realize how much of survival out here is luck. Luck that your water's clean, luck that the doctor's sober, luck that the snake missed. You think about all the movies where the hero survives impossible odds, and you shake your head. Out here, the odds are never in your favor. You crawl into bed, exhausted, and promise yourself that tomorrow you'll stick to coffee, avoid cacti, and steer clear of any miracle cures. In the Wild West, it's not the outlaws that'll get you. It's the land, the water, and the medicine. And if you're smart, you'll learn to respect them all. You're just starting to feel a little more confident, maybe even a bit savvy, when you overhear a heated argument at the back table of the saloon. Two men, one in a dusty suit and the other in a battered cowboy hat, are shouting about gold bars and guaranteed returns. You can't help but listen in, and soon realize you're witnessing a modern echo of every Wild West con you've seen so far. Turns out, the tricks of the trade haven't changed much, just the costumes. The man in the suit is waving a small gleaming bar, promising it's pure gold, straight from a secret mine. He's offering shares in his exclusive investment opportunity, and a small crowd is gathering, eyes wide with hope and greed. Mainstream history tells us that gold bar scams have been around since the first nugget was pulled from a riverbed. Historians still argue whether the biggest fortunes in the West were made by miners or by the men who sold them dreams. You watch as the cowboy, skeptical but tempted, asks to test the bar. The conman produces a small vial of acid, drips it on the bar, and, miracle of miracles, it passes the test. What the crowd doesn't know is that the bar is only gold-plated, and the acid test is a cheap trick. A quirky tidbit: in the late 1800s, swindlers would hollow out real gold coins, fill them with lead, and seal them back up, fooling even experienced bankers. You wander outside, mulling over the scene. It's not just gold bars. Everywhere you look, someone's selling a shortcut to riches. There's a man hawking patented mining maps that promise to reveal hidden veins, and another selling shares in a telegraph company that's nothing more than a tent and some wire. You realize that the Wild West's greatest export wasn't gold or silver. It was hope, packaged and sold to anyone desperate enough to buy. You think about the modern world where online scams and get-rich-quick schemes are just as common. The platforms have changed, but the pitch is the same. Easy money, guaranteed returns, and a promise that you're smarter than everyone else. Historians still debate whether people fall for these cons out of greed, desperation, or simple optimism. Maybe it's all three. You head back into the saloon, where the argument has ended and the crowd has dispersed. The cowboy sits alone, staring at the fake gold bar, a look of resignation on his face. You feel a pang of sympathy. After all, who hasn't wanted to believe in a shortcut to fortune? A bartender leans over and whispers, "Happens every week. Folks never learn." As night falls, you join a group around the fire, swapping stories of scams old and new. One miner tells of a friend who lost his life savings to a miracle drilling machine that never worked. Another recalls the infamous blue sky scam, where investors bought shares in a mine that existed only on paper. You realize that in the Wild West, and today, the only thing more dangerous than a loaded gun is an empty promise. You wrap your blanket tighter, grateful for your hard-earned skepticism. You know now that survival isn't just about dodging bullets or finding water. It's about seeing through the illusions, the cons, and the dreams that never quite come true. And as you drift off to sleep, you wonder what new tricks tomorrow will bring, and whether you'll be wise enough to spot them. You wake to the sound of distant thunder, not a storm, but the pounding of hooves as another posse rides out, chasing some new trouble across the plains. Your bones ache, your boots are worn thin, and you realize just how much the Wild West has taken out of you. You step outside, blinking in the harsh morning light, and take a long look at the town. It's quieter than before, the streets scattered with tumbleweeds and the ghosts of yesterday's dreams. You wander past the saloon, where the bartender gives you a nod of weary recognition. The piano is silent, the card table's empty. You realize that even the hardiest souls can't keep up with the relentless pace of Boomtown life forever. Mainstream history tells us that most newcomers lasted only a few months before packing up or being packed out by poverty, by violence, or by the simple grind of survival. Historians still argue whether the Wild West was tamed by lawmen, by railroads, or by the exhaustion of the people themselves. You pass the sheriff, who's cleaning his gun on the porch. He looks older than he did yesterday, and you wonder if he'll be here tomorrow. A quirky tidbit: some frontier towns went through a dozen sheriffs in a single year, each one convinced they'd be the one to bring order, until the chaos chewed them up and spit them out. You make your way to the edge of town, where the prairie stretches out, endless and indifferent. You think about all the dangers you've faced: brawls, scams, poisoned water, and the ever-present threat of a bullet in the back. You realize that no amount of grit or luck could truly prepare you for the grinding uncertainty of frontier life. Even the toughest, sharpest, most stubborn modern soul would be lucky to last a week out here. The Wild West doesn't care about your credentials or your confidence. It only asks one thing: can you survive another day? You watch as a wagon train creaks out of town, families huddled beneath canvas, chasing the next rumor of gold or land or hope. You wonder if they know what they're in for. You doubt it. You give them a wave, wishing them luck they'll surely need. As the sun sets, you find yourself back where you started, boots dusty, heart heavy, but somehow grateful. Grateful for the lessons, for the scars, for the simple fact of having made it through. You know now that the real story of the Wild West isn't about heroes or villains, but about ordinary people doing their best to survive in a world that never cut them a break. You close your eyes, the sounds of the town fading into memory. Tomorrow, the cycle will start again. New faces, new dreams, new dangers. But for tonight, you rest, knowing you've lived a lifetime in a single day. The prairie wind softens as twilight settles, and the last rays of sun slip behind the distant hills. The raucous energy of the Boomtown fades to a gentle hush, broken only by the soft rustle of grass and the quiet chirp of crickets. You let your breath slow, your muscles loosen, and feel the weight of the day's dangers drift away like dust on the breeze. You picture the empty saloon, the silent card tables, the sheriff's tired eyes. The Wild West, for all its chaos and clamor, finds a strange peace in the quiet moments between storms. You realize that even the toughest frontiers were crossed one careful step at a time, and every legend was just a person, hopeful, frightened, stubborn, trying to make it through the night. Let your mind wander over the memories you've gathered, the taste of gritty coffee, the heat of the desert sun, the laughter echoing through a rowdy saloon. Each scene softens, growing dim and distant, as if seen through a veil of sleep. The dangers and the noise fade, replaced by the gentle certainty that, for now, you are safe, you are warm, and you are home. As your breathing deepens, imagine the prairie stretching out beneath a sky full of stars. Let the hush of the frontier soothe your thoughts, and know that even in the wildest places, peace can be found at the end of the day. Rest easy, dreamer. Tomorrow's adventure can wait.